They are there and are.
Okay. To ask the questions, and then we will.
So, welcome. We're so happy that you're giving us your evening. This is kind of like school. I really, it is school. Everybody's sitting in the back. And you like the back, yeah. So I always liked the front. It wasn't until I got married that I realized the idea is move to the front. You can hear setting.
What?
Welcome. This is the North Wasco County School District 21 kickoff of the facility planning process. Community involvement is very important to the school district, and so I think it is a first for us anyway that we have the citizens coming to the meeting and also streaming online, which is great use of technology. I do think in respect of your time, we're going to start on time and we will finish on time. That doesn't mean we're going to shut off any conversation. It means that we can carry it over to the next meeting, we can take it offline, we can answer questions. Our goal is to use the most efficient use of your time. So we will first start with a few introductions, and then we'll go through agenda. At that time, I'll let you ask any questions about the agenda. A couple things. Let's see. There is a sign-in sheet. They're floating around. Thank you. Cindy will be making all of this information that we're going to present tonight available online. So the sign-in sheets, if they want direct correspondence, can they do that?
Absolutely.
All right. Welcome. Come on in. So we would like to start with just introduction of who is here. So we're going to start with ourselves. My name is Richard Higgins. I am an educational school planner. That doesn't mean I design curriculum. I design school buildings. I am a principal in BLRB Architects.
I'm Dakota Shatler. I also work for BLRB Architects. I'm a designer and get to deal with this guy every day.
So, would you please start? Welcome back, by the way. The press.
Need a sense of what the Dallas Chronicle.
DJ Garnis, with Columbia Bank.
Eric Studebaker, community member.
Stephanie Studebaker, ID21 board.
Very good.
I'm Cassie Ware, campaigning for, I'm not campaigning here. I'm a candidate for Wasco County School.
She did her homework. She told me she did.
I did.
Welcome. Thank you. Sure.
I'm Jose Aparicio, community member, and then I'm also a candidate for one of the school board positions.
Dawn Rasmussen, I'm currently on the school board and I'll be running in the election this fall.
Very good.
Alan Usling, community member.
I'm Andy Cotting. I'm a parent. I'm a District 21 staff member. I'm a community member. I'm very concerned about the economic future of our community.
Very good.
I'm Phil Brady. I'm D21 staff member and I'm here representing the Columbia Medical Center.
I'm Shannon Saldivar, community member.
Cindy, why don't you kick us off on that, please?
Cindy Miller, advocate of the North Wasco County School District in the Administration Office.
I'm Erica Flores, also a candidate for the school board.
I'm Randy Anderson. I'm the CFO at the school district.
Candy Arshar, I'm the superintendent of North Wasco County School District.
Trudy Lupkeys, community member, parent, candidate for school board.
Dave Peters, community member, not running for anything.
Yes.
Not here.
Rebecca Thistlethwaite, 21 board member and parent of a new high schooler. Kathy Hirschbrunn, 21 school board.
Sandra Harris, middle school principal and parent.
Donna Carter, facilities with the school district.
So if there's any questions about anything we did tonight, ask Don. No, we did rely we relied heavily on Don to providing us access to schools, and then also the principals. We came over Christmas break, letting us have access to all the schools for the assessment. So, welcome. Come on in. Welcome. There's plenty of seats up front. folks, some new folks. Some folks that we've seen before and some new folks. We're very excited about everybody, but those new attendees, we're very glad that you dedicated the time to come out and really drill down on the planning process itself and really providing input into the school district and how this should proceed and making good decisions down the road. Projected outcomes and goals. Very simply tonight is intended to inform. We're going to provide some information about the condition assessment, how the condition assessment was created, and the template provided by the Oregon Department of Education. That's informative. Then the other outcome is to outline exactly by ODE standards, Oregon Department of Education, how the long-range facility planning process is to proceed. The important element to this is ODE has to approve all of this when we submit the report. So the intention of this committee is to help fulfill some of the requirements that ODE has asked. However, more importantly is really that determination of what's best for your kids and your schools. Meeting norms. I think this kind of goes without saying. All ideas are good ideas. Please give everybody the opportunity to speak. We will do our best to kind of give everybody the opportunity. That's why we have smaller tables. Give everybody the opportunity to provide input. Cindy is doing a great job. She's going to record most of it. All of it. The opportunity for asking questions. Candy, would you be so kind as to qualify or clarify exactly how you can ask questions from online or as well?
Right, so it would be impossible to answer all the questions tonight, so there may be some that are appropriate to be answered at this time as you move along, just a clarifying question, those kinds of things. But as people are either present here or viewing us online, they can send questions to Cindy, and or if you have questions you'd like to either write down or turn over that don't get answered tonight, we will take those and be going through them. That'll help us for the planning process for not only answering those questions that pertain to this work and getting that information out online as soon as possible, but also if some of it needs to move forward, we will have it for another meeting perhaps to help inform and shape that meeting.
I'm going to use that as the segue into how we do proceed with the meetings. It's always important that we cover data. Tonight is just information. You're going to get more information about how we proceed. Once the actual process is laid out, its schedules and meetings, our intention is to start on time, finish on time, as I've already mentioned, but also we're going to record questions. So as we close the meeting, if there's outstanding questions or assignments that are for the school district or ourselves to follow up with appropriate responses, that's how we will start the next meeting, addressing those issues that are outstanding so that we capture everything. So I've run through a bunch of introductory information. Does anybody have a question about what I've described already? All right. The real questions are coming. I got it. Okay. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the state of Oregon with the facility condition assessment reports. The state of Oregon has struggled with school condition for a long time. Other states provide funding for capital improvements at schools. The state of Oregon only recently has come up with a process for helping school districts fund schools in the amount of $2 to $8 million. If you look at school construction costs across the state, you can see that's really nice, but it pales by comparison to the total cost of improvements. Improvements in a state that will not be named across the river, they fund up to 50% or higher of the total school construction cost. So obviously the state of Oregon is a little bit behind. So the state has been the legislature has been in a debate on how they fund schools. And this was actually communicated to us by ODE representatives. So, the state of Oregon doesn't fund schools. We are now in part. Legislature is divided into two camps. One, the schools don't need the money. The other schools need money. And the state doesn't have money to fund the schools. Those in favor say, we've got to fund our schools. They're behind. They're not in good shape. We've really got to do something. Those who have opposition or say the state can't afford it says, that's great. How much do you need? The response is, we don't know. And they say, well, go find out. We don't know the magnitude of our challenges across the state of Oregon, particularly in small school districts. You're a medium-sized school district. The small school district have no funding to do anything. So they have created this TAP grant process, which funds this process. Let's all stand up and applaud Dan's spots. Thank you. Dan and I go way back. We're good friends. So thank you. Let me. I say we're good friends. I better check that. We are. Okay. So the state is funding assessment of schools statewide. That's why the state reimburses the school district for the report. They don't get, it's not a grant, it's a rebate. Once the report is submitted and the state signs off on it, then the school is reimbursed for the assessment and the planning process. The goal of the state is to create a database of all the school needs across the state so they can begin to have a strategy for funding school improvements statewide. So it made sense to me when they explained it, and I became a huge proponent of the process across the state, and we're really grateful that the state has carved out a little bit of money so that every school district can do this assessment process. What that means is they have to standardize it. It has to be consistent. No matter where you are in the state, it has to have a standardized process for evaluating it. And I'm going to show you in detail how that works, so that everybody's on the same level of assessment, so you're getting a constant number. There are cost indexes that are variable depending upon your location. There are some variables, but basically the way all schools are assessed is the same across the state. This is relatively new, maybe 4 years. Somebody looked that up. What did it say? How old is it?
I can't remember if it was 2011 or 13 when the ORS was passed to start all of this. I don't know exactly.
So prior to that, there was an ORS for all school districts of 2,000 students or greater had to do this process, but there was no funding for it. So they actually added the funding, and that's kind of taken out. We're going to talk about the assessment, the elements of assessment, the assessment process, and then show you the findings. So I apologize, but the spreadsheets, we're going to look at an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to explain to you how it works. Now, I'm an Excel nerd, so I love it. But we're going to show you how it works. And we're going to make all 100 and, how many pages?
Ish, 157, I think. Don't quote me on that.
Pages of the assessment available online. So, because it's just so big. Yes?
The way you're talking, does that mean the D21 assessment has already been done?
Yes.
Okay.
So, over the winter holiday, we actually got into the schools and did the assessment as well as the structural engineers, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So the elements, I want to show you, it's important to know what was evaluated. It's not just somebody walking out on site and saying, okay, this looks great. Yeah, this looks, okay. So with that, we're going to move on. Process, this is my long explanation. Here we go. These are the categories of the assessment. Sorry.
Is this part of the packet that will be available?
This entire presentation will be available online.
Perfect.
Yeah, you don't have to make any notes, except your own annotations. Okay. So, the first part, and you'll see this corresponding in the spreadsheet, They do an evaluation of the substructure and basement conditions. Our structural engineer did this visual assessment of observable systems. That's key, observable. You didn't do any drilling, didn't do any destructive testing, didn't do any core sampling. It's just looking at the conditions. So the structure was looked at. Basement construction is really important, especially here in Oregon, where if we have cracks in the foundation, there's water intrusion. Interiors. So in the interiors, it's just interior construction. That's walls, ceilings, floors, doors, door hardware. I'm going to show these to you. But essentially, it's just all those elements that you touch on a day-to-day basis. Stairs, elevators. Stairs and elevators are on there. If an elevator doesn't exist, it's a code requirement. It's not on the list. It is in the ADA list. Interior construction, I jumped ahead. Interior construction of the stud wall and the fur outs and those elements that actually hold it all up. The superstructure, that's the framing, the condition of the structure itself. It could be masonry. It could be masonry, concrete block exterior. It could be a steel frame. It could be a wood frame. What's the condition of the outside wall? Is there water infiltrating? Is it stucco? Is it brick? Is it metal siding? Roofing is a really important. What kind of roof? Is it sloped? Is it flat? What's the condition of the roof? This is where the elevators, conveying systems, also known as an elevator. It's a fancy word for an elevator. Plumbing, obviously. Heating, ventilating, air conditioning. And again, these are observable systems. So they're looking at it. They're asking Don questions, asking your site custodial staff what they deal with on a regular basis. Fire protection. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which schools have fire suppression systems, but are they functional? I know at the high school there's some rooms that have fire suppression. Yeah. Others don't. Electrical, is there enough service into the building? What's the condition? Are they breakers? Are the old fuses? What's that condition? Then the last two are equipment and furnishings. This is fixed furnishings. Bonds used to be, or funding of fixture or of equipment used to be limited to anything that was fixed in place. There's a little bit more leniency than that now. That's essentially all the equipment that is fixed. Science, you'll see the list, science, any career tech ed programs, and then furnishings. What's the condition of casework? That's cabinets. Then the site work, obviously, sidewalks, lighting, what?
Parking lots and paving.
Parking lots and paving. Is it alligating? We'll show you. And then mechanical utilities, inventory, electrical utilities. So this is the overview. So each one of these items have a criteria.
I'm also, well, I switched the slides, where we skipped F, if you're at the alphabet down. These letters actually correlate to the spreadsheets you will see. So A is part of the category. The section F wasn't included for some reason in this, so I wanted to actually correlate them with the spreadsheet. So that way, if you guys are looking at this presentation and the spreadsheet at the same time, you will see that category A holds those things. I do know my ABCs.
So what we're going to do now is show you an example of the findings. This is like watching paint dry, but it's really, really important information for you. There's, like I said, there's 8 buildings, or excuse me, there's 8 sites, and there's 13 buildings. Each building is done individually. Each building has a state building ID number. So the report, that's where it got up to the 150 plus pages, is because each school has multiple buildings. Colonel Wright's perfect example is a good example. You've got the original building, you've got the admin, media, multi-purpose room building, and then you've got the addition in the back. 3 buildings. Each one of those was investigated individually. So what we're going to show you tonight is just the high school. And you can see the pixelated images are, again, this is what they provide us. I've gone to the highest DPI on the projector, so I'll have to, we're going to show you how it works, and then the 156-page report will have all of it. So, the critical things that we start with that make sense. So again, we gave these spreadsheets to our reviewers, our inspectors, and they were on site. Dakota and I did some inspections. Like I said, the mechanical, structural, electrical, plumbing engineers had their own team of investigators, if you will. So the first thing, this is the state spreadsheet. The first thing, of course, is the school district. The school, this is the Dallas High School site. We're going to look first at the Dallas High School main building. Now the main building is the original school and the Career Tech Ed addition. So that makes up one building. The other 2 buildings is the Jack and Choose one, and the other one is the original gym, the auxiliary gym, and the weight room. 3 buildings. So, in the first column we got, these are those headings to which I referred earlier: substructure, the shell, building shell. Each one of these underneath it are the subheadings. We're going to start just with substructure. And for substructure, you have the type as this. This is the percentage of the building or the number. What percentage of what we're about to evaluate is covered in this building? In this case, it only has one foundation that we evaluate. It covers the entire building. How many square feet are in that building? What was it?
115,000.
So it's, at this point, it's pretty simple math. It's 100% of 150,000 square foot building. So the options on this of the level of action necessary to repair it. Repair means nothing more than that. It's not it might be replace it, but it's just repair it to bring it back to where it was when it started, or to temporarily have fixed, like a crack in the wall. Welcome. A crack in the basement wall. You can't really take all that concrete out and build the wall back because you got a building above it, but you can patch it and seal it. So we've got choices. We don't get to determine what the level of improvements might be. They've told us what those level of improvements will look like. So first step is, how much of the building do we evaluate? This standard foundation is 100% of the entire building. We have the choice of everything's fine, none. There's minor level of action, minor repair, moderate repair, major repair, or replace it. So we go out there, we're going to look at just the foundations. What are these blacked out ones? ODE only gives us the option of a minor repair or a major repair. Nothing else. There's no replace. So anybody that's an Excel nerd, these little comments, these are great. I'm going to have to read this one for you. So by ODE definition, a minor crack observed. Fill and seal the cracks to prevent water intrusion. That's a minor. At the high school, we saw minor cracks. So we deemed it minor. What major says is settlement observed in the surrounding conditions, required stabilization of the foundation, subgrade adjustment, and reinforcement of the foundation. These are the spreadsheet words. We didn't write them in there. They're giving us some parameters to which to measure the condition. If you find a minor crack, it's a minor. If you find settlement and crumbling, that's major. Now, the next step is once you see, you go, okay, this is a minor. It's only limited to this area. So in our estimation, it's only 10% of the entire building. So that's the next entry is what percentage of the system or finish is needing minor repair. This is what's really cool. You go, oh, this is $13,320. The state has a cost data model that's part of the spreadsheet. That is down here into the physical condition assessment tables. Read only, do not touch. And you can see it has unit costs for every single, you can see it has unit costs for every single, here you go. In the case of a minor, it's $1 a square foot. In the case of major, it's $20 a square foot. So we don't touch any of this. This is what I was talking about. They're trying to get a snapshot of what it looks like across the state with all the same levels of inspection.
So, Richard, question. So are the same inspectors inspecting every building? The same company, or are they using local inspectors?
So you have to be a certified assessor. And the state has the classes, and once you become certified, then you can do assessments. To qualify to become an assessor, you have to have done long-range facility planning assessment at the state, about 5 examples. So it's not just somebody coming off the street. You have to have a background history.
Because if you're doing cross-the-board assessment, you know, 2 different people are going to give 2 different assessments of the same crack.
But that's why they have, it's only a minor or a major. There's
Okay.
nothing else. The percentage, yes, it could vary. Somebody could say it's 12% or it's 10%. It is an observable system, and this is one of hundreds. So that is where the variable is.
Okay.
I was just curious, do they update the cost estimates like on an annual basis or anything?
Yes. On an annual basis is exactly what they do. Yeah. These are great questions. So they're trying to minimize the variables. True.
Right.
You're exactly right. And so that's what. And for the heating, ventilating, structural, we're going to use the same certified inspectors for our work so that we know how they respond. So okay, we got one done. Oh, yes.
For the cost, per square foot, is there a method that they adjust that for, like it's harder and more expensive for us to get materials or work with people out here. Do they adjust that as well?
Yes, they do. Each location, and it's by county, has a cost in a factor to it.
Okay.
So we can show. We didn't have that one in there, but for instance, in Portland Metro, it's like 13% higher than what they're calling the standard. And
Pull it up. County cost factor. It's right there on the very edge. Yeah.
And in the
Okay.
In the bottom. Yeah.
that one.
Yeah. That's the one.
So
You can't see. It's just off the edge of the screen, but of course.
that's because I bumped the screen. So you can, if you could see, there's Clackamas, Multnomah, Washington. Those are 1.13, which means it's a 13% premium above standard. Here's Wasco. Oh, there we go. It's 5% above standard. So that's, again, we don't control any of this. So what this formula does is it factors in your locale based on the data. So we have a data sheet that we start with that. We essentially put in all the data for all the buildings, and it automatically populates it to the assessment page. That's why each building has their own facility condition assessment.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. Again, back to your question, Trina, I really love it. That's great. You know, the variable of the inspector becomes kind of negligible if you kind of stack it up against everything else, and it's one item. And what they're looking for is that big picture. Please don't go out and take these budgets and say, we're ready to get to work. It just doesn't work that way. This is a snapshot of where you are today. Today. The cost now, not 15 months, 2 years from now when you're actually going to be doing the work. There is inflation involved. It's not inflating it out into the future. It's telling you what these costs are today, which is why you're going to do this long-range facility planning process. So it's also just going to fix what you have. So I'm going to talk a little bit more. I think the high school is a really good illustration. What they're talking about here is not to renovate the high school. It's just to fix what you got. So I'll give you some illustrations of that. I'm going to skip over, or not skip over, I'm going to go to another category. Structure is kind of, we touched on structure. The other one, I can do it this way. There were some basement walls. So 5% of the entire building has a basement wall. Only 1% of it really had any cracks and conditions. So that's why it's a $1,300 fix. It's pretty minor. All right. So superstructure, everything. The next one is here. So the exterior of the original high school is wood frame with stucco. And that is 62% of the entire building envelope. We calculate that based on actual square footage. We do the math. We love square footage. 62%. The remainder is panel siding, and there's even some formed concrete tilt. So, we have established that 16% of the 115,000 is the stucco. And here are your options. Minor is not an option. This side. Minor is surfaces intact, but finish is deteriorated and needs some paint. Okay? We're going to show you some pictures too. We're not going to go. We're going to show you kind of a collage for each school. There's lots of cracking on that building. Major cracks visible, route and patch prior to painting. That's moderate, I'm sorry. What that means is clean those joints out and patch it. We categorize those cracks that way. There's not any real building settlement, which the next category is replace. Similar in failure with evidence of water intrusion, remove it and replace it. You've got some spots, but it's not tearing off all the stucco of the building and putting it back. So in our evaluation, it's about 20% of the walls really need that treatment. Even in that case, it's $132,000 to patch and repair. 20% of the walls, okay? The next category is exterior windows. There's 95% of the exterior windows are wood. Next time you're over at the high school, stop and look at the windows. Look at the windows from the inside. Look at them from the outside. Is anybody taught there? Students don't yet. Okay. The windows need to be replaced. That's what we said was all the windows need to be replaced because they're in various conditions of all of them. Various conditions of needing of repair. The caulk may be hot, which means it may have asbestos in it. And because this is a historic building, you're going to pay twice the price for those windows. You can't put any other kind of window in there. So the window replacement alone, we have it at $1.5 million worth of windows. That comes from, in this case, the ODE does allow us to fine-tune the estimate. If we just put in windows, it would be half that. There's a lot of windows. But we used cost data from an estimator, And we put that in the spreadsheet for ODE to sign off on it. We say, this is our assumption. Okay? The next one we've got exterior doors. Pretty small. The exterior doors, like, what did we say, 3? All right, over here, this is a little bit different. It says 23. That's not 23%. That's not 23 square feet. That's 23 doors. When you start talking about actual elements you can count, like doors, that's why we counted 23. And 15% of those, or 3, need to be, what do we say here? Minor. Hardware is damaged, non-functional, requires replacement. That is moderate. Thank you. I was reading the wrong side of the column. That's $1,100. So the next one we've got is, all right, back to any student in the building. How many leaks do you have? Okay. Built-up roof, 100%. Built-up roof is where they put down layers and they put either coal tar or hot tar and build up the roof. It's flat roofs, essentially. 60% of the roofs we think need to be replaced. And that's the roofing, the insulation is probably wet underneath. Just so the roofing alone, we assess it essentially $800,000. $799 and a lot of change. So you can see we've gone over, and I'm very sorry about the bad, this bad music. It doesn't look bad. It's a little better, okay. So, some skylights that leak, $260.
Is this where we just go to the bar and start drinking?
No, dude, I know, that's it's depressing.
Okay,
I agree.
okay.
Thanks for calling that out.
So if I was gonna announce right now that we're going through all 13 spreadsheets, yes. We want to know from you. We're going to keep going so that you see the detail of this. We've got the entire high school. We think we can. What time? Thank you.
It's 6:37.
6:37. We think we can go through all 3, we can go through the high school, and then we can show you the rest. So, is that, let me see a hands. Who wants to see, and we've only gone through 2 categories. So tell you what, we're going to go through 1, and then we'll take a vote whether we should proceed on. Does that sound like a good plan? Because we have a very important piece, is we want to explain to you the process going forward. And we want to make sure we have time to explain that, because some of you, maybe all of you, can participate. And we want to show you what ODE's vision of that looks like. So, does anybody object to my just going through this 1, and then let's take a time check? Okay. I see some nodding heads, right? All right.
Is there any environmental, like air quality with the things being wet?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, we've got a whole other spreadsheet for that one.
Multiple checklists.
We've got multiple checklists.
Before we jump in, is there anybody who's confused how the spreadsheet works at all? I just want to be sure if everyone gets it. Right on. Awesome.
This is what's available to us? Or?
The PDF of this report will be available.
Okay.
So if you want to scrutinize the report,
I just wasn't sure if it was even in the spreadsheet.
no.
It will be in a spreadsheet format.
Format.
So
Yeah.
you will have each of the 3 high school buildings with their spreadsheets, and it's in this big old pamphlet with a bunch of pages. You guys can go through it at your leisure. We'll get that to you within the next couple days. Yes?
Is there anything in here that talks about energy efficiency?
Yeah, a little bit, but nothing going toward green design or passive. This is just, again, observable system snapshot. We're not necessarily designing or changing anything. This is just, here's what you guys got right now.
Well, I was thinking about the windows, if you could put double pane windows in those historically designed window frames.
Yeah.
So the number,
It's definitely an option.
so the number that we put in there is an insulated unit. These are contemporary replacements, but it's like for like. So I am going to jump ahead a little bit. We'll come back to that one, but there have been several questions about other aspects of a school. So again, what the state is trying to do right now is ascertain what is the cost to fix what we have. But it doesn't include some of the contemporary modifications that we're making to schools. And so let me show you the other tabs. They don't have cost models to them. They are only a yes-no toggle. The long-range facility planning process gives you the power to say, this is an important element. We need to look at doing this for all of our schools. A classic one that every school district's doing, safety and security for our kids. What do we got to do about that? So that gets addressed in the facilities assessment of saying, okay, we need to do this. This is important to our community. This is what we need to do. So let me show you these other ones. Now, this is where Don and his staff came in handy. We've got these tabs down here. Security it's a yes/no question. What do you have in place? So if it's a no, then that gives you an indication that you ought to look at that. That might be something that you want to upgrade as part of some sort of long-range plan. This gives you a guide of, okay, are these school grounds fenced? No. Is that important to you? Please don't answer. But this is what we go through to ask these questions. Is there one clearly marked designated entrance for visitors? Well, of course, with school, you want everybody to come in the front door when school's in session so you can determine who's coming and going out of school. Yes, that's great. Signs posted from the main office to the designated entrance telling everybody where to go. Restricted areas are clearly marked. Yes. Shrubs and foliage are trimmed to allow good line of sight. Yes. Shrubs near buildings have been trimmed up to allow view underneath them. That's a no. So you can see by doing this kind of assessment standard across all schools, you can begin to kind of say, oh, we need to do this. We need to do this. Or we've done this. Okay, we've got this. So the other categories are scheduled maintenance for outside lights. Don and his crew is doing all. Outside lights, locks, hardware, storage sheds, windows, other buildings. Parent drop-off and pickup area is clearly defined. You know, everybody would think that's a circulation and traffic problem. No, it's a safety and security problem. So there's more to it than just how do students freely get in and out of it. I mean, you struggle with Dry Gulch forever. Dry Hollow, I'm sorry. Lighting around the building, yes. Let's see the no's. The school ground is free from trash and debris. School is free of graffiti. So the reports, there's a lot of study about graffiti, and honestly, if families are engaged in schools, then the likelihood that graffiti will appear is actually reduced. And if you start engaging kids in creating a prideful school, then graffiti is reduced because they actually begin to kind of passively police it. So, I mean, these are good indications of some of the measures that you might want to take that go beyond the technology and the cameras. Play areas are fenced, not applicable. Tamper-proof fasteners on playground equipment. Video surveillance at bike racks, yes. Main office parking lot surveillance, yes. Properly lighted parking lots, no. Accessible lenses are protected by some unbreakable material. Maybe that's not important. That's a no. Outside hardware has been removed from doors except points of entry, yes. Have no broken panes, yes. Locking hardware is in working order, yes. Basement windows are protected with grills and well covers. It's a pretty comprehensive list. What you do with it is the next step. High risk of protected high security locks and alarm systems, look at that. Main office, not the cafeteria. Computer labs, industrial arts, science labs, nurse office, boiler room, electrical room, yes. Phone online access closet, not applicable. Unused area of school being closed off during school activities, yes. Two-way communication. You've got a good shape classroom, duty station, relocatable classrooms. I love that, relocatable classrooms. Modular, okay. Staff and faculty outside building, yes. Buses, yes. Central alarm system at school, yes. Outdated, but update required. So, and then the last one, the main entrance is visible from the main office, yes. So you can, I hope you can see how you take this checklist and ask me all these good questions about what you need to do relative to security. And you get to make the decision if this is something that you want to include in an overall facility plan and improvement plan. ADA is the next category. So, Americans with Disability Act is a civil right. There is a code called the ADA code, which is great. It tells you, it provides us insight with what are the clearances. Some clearances, or some are not achievable, but every student and parent and staff has a right to a job and the access to that workplace regardless of their disability. So we did not do an ADA assessment. That could be a whole standalone piece. If you wanted to go through and assess the entire school, each school, and come up with an accessibility plan, it can be done. The same level of questions. Again, once you reach that point, what do you want to do with that? This would be really good. You know, honestly, I encourage everyone to, when you get the access to it, look through it. Look at your school. It's okay to be selfish. If everybody is selfish about their school, we'll cover them all. So, at least one route cited. Keep an eye on my focus. There's at least one route from site arrival point that does not require a use of stairs. At the high school, it's no. There's a ramp, but it's not the code. Code requires ramp to be 1 inch of rise for every 12 linear feet. Sometimes there's just not enough space. And if anybody didn't know, you have a pretty severe topography in the Dallas. At least one van accessible parking space. Kudos, good job. Slope to accessible parking spaces is no steeper than 1 in 48 in all directions, no. Access aisle joins an accessible roof, no. Accessible spaces identified with a sign, international symbol of accessibility, no. Sign call reads fan accessible. Accessible crosses the curb. And these are all challenges that you can fix, but they're going to cost some money. Don and his crew and the school district have done the best they can with it. These schools weren't built to meet the accessibility code. So now that it's here, and I would bet you've got students or parents or staff who've requested an accommodation so that they can either go to school or bring their kids to school or work. And it's perfectly fine for the school district to meet those needs and those accommodations. So I could read these too. This is another checklist of items, so please read it in detail. I'm going to go to IT. Information technology, we depended on...
Don, correct me with Cody Herman?
Yeah, Cody and his team already.
School district is doing their best to keep up with everything that we deal with in our home. Bandwidth, accessibility, power, clean power, security. The school districts are racing to keep up. Technology is becoming integral to the overall teaching and learning environment. The school district does a great job with what they've got. This is a good checklist of, okay, think about this. What about this? What about this? The state wants to know what your school district's condition is. And so we rely on Cody to give us good update and information about this. Building cabling, 6, some Cat 5e, Cat 5, no. Access controls. Here's an interesting, that bullet 5. Access controls all run on your low voltage system, your technology. In my career as an architect and planner, when I started, low voltage didn't exist. It was a Bell system. That was really low. It was like phone line. That's as far as it went. It's all analog phones and everything that we can run with low voltage and firewire and cabling that doesn't even need power is exploded. And so the security systems are trying to capture that and make their systems more affordable, that you don't need power to them. You have low voltage data and communication in the same way. Harmful substances. This is the first question that each category. Here's lead, asbestos. The question here, has your facility been assessed for asbestos? If so, when? Yes. December 18?
18 was the last 3 years.
School districts used to have no hero report.
Used to have it.
And all it really did was kind of broad brush. Yeah, you've got materials that are that vintage, and you probably have asbestos. So you now know that when you look at the Dallas High School, you do have a hazardous material report. There is asbestos in the facility, so that needs to be a line item on your budget. What do you do with the asbestos abatement? That costs money to have it removed.
Why does it say date unknown for lead?
Don, can you
Well, for overall lead test, no, we haven't had an overall lead test. We have spot tests, you know, if work needs to be done. And based on the spot test and just the vintage, we can say, yes, we have lead, probably most everywhere, especially the old.
However, if you're concerned about lead in the water, we went through that.
Well, yeah, with lead in the water, we have those, lead in the water.
And there's not lead in the water.
Yeah. We got good water though.
mold, they're all checked no. Is mold abatement included in your future mod plans? Water quality, there we go. It's been assessed for lead 2015, yes. Water quality concern currently in your facility, no. This is a good no. Water treatment included in your future bond, yes per OD. Okay. PCBs or PCBs in your facility, no. Has your school been assessed for radon? Yes. Is radon in your facility? Yes. So these are identifying those areas that have to be addressed. No, I beg your pardon. That's up to you. That should be addressed for life safety of the occupants. And not to be the indoor air quality. Somebody asked that. There is a designated person to do and implement indoor air quality management plan for your school district. Yes. The school district has indoor air quality management plan for those steps preventing and resolving indoor air quality program problems. Not yet. Schools inspected once or twice a year for the condition that may lead to indoor air quality program problems. Is preventative maintenance schedule established and operations for the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system? Is the schedule in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendation for accepted practice for HVAC? All PMs, what's PMs?
Preventive maintenance.
Thank you. Including HVAC are in the CMS system used by the district. So, yes. It looks like the rest of the yes are all about doing the best they can with maintaining good indoor air quality. Humidifiers, other HVAC systems, components from doing certain such covered ceilings, tiles, account during regular emergency maintenance activities and visual inspection? Yes. Are damp and wet packs read normally? In general, local exhaust ventilation used when housekeeping and maintenance activities could reasonably be expected to result in exposure to hazardous substances above applicable exposure limits. The ODE wrote that, didn't he?
That's a run-on sentence.
All right. So those are the subcategories, and we went through that for all 13 buildings. But you can see there's probably pretty consistent on all 8 sides. Yes.
If you go back to radon, it looked like it was a no, and since this is a public meeting.
Yeah.
Those are all done, yes.
So we haven't been this asked for radon.
Right.
We have a radon plan, and per the state, it's, I think it's due 2021, I believe. But don't quote me on the date, but it's coming up. We have a plan to be tested before the date that's due. And the plan's actually posted on the website.
We have a plan to test, do we have a plan to mitigate?
That's part of the plan, based on the findings, of course.
Yeah.
And that will change based on what type of findings, how much, et cetera, and location.
Thank you.
No, that's a great question. I wish we had one big answer for all these buildings, but this is the detail. We go through every single school, and we have summarized it for you, but not these. These are discussions that would go to the next level. The mitigation of these, it needs more definition. Before we could, Don's doing his best with, the radon testing, for instance. Once you do the radon testing, what's the cost of mitigation? Who knows? So I did read through this pretty quickly. I do want you to look at the reports. We can go through these line by line if you wish. So we're going to go back to the facility assessment. Are there any questions about this? I apologize for bouncing so much, but somebody asked about it. I didn't want to keep. Wait.
If I can make a comment real quick.
Please.
Because we're talking about radon, lead, asbestos, mold, these are, really scary things. We can say that they're as safe as they can be in the state that we're in right now. We don't have real friable asbestos, just exposed. They're as safe as they can be right now without, without doing a full abatement, which that obviously is a huge issue. They are safe right now.
To add to that, I did a lot of these assessments, and a lot of the schools, especially classrooms, the floors have already been abated. There's tons of areas you can see the asbestos has been removed, so don't start freaking out. Don's totally on it. Everything is looking pretty good. There's just areas where under the tiles, there's glue that contains asbestos. So if those tiles are chipped at any point, that becomes an issue. But they are all sealed and just fine as of this current moment.
Now I'm going to dogpile. You're no different than every other school district just saying.
Or probably the country, so
Yeah.
it's not just an Oregon issue.
Yeah, I mean, post-World War II, that was the #1 fire retardant. Okay, so every 9x9 tile you see is an asbestos tile, but it's not nearly as challenging as the adhesive that is. So you're not any different. I appreciate the code's comment, and we do see it in every school district. But when you do have an improvement plan, that's the best time to abate it. Essentially, you're going to put in new flooring, or you take care of it all at once. And actually, I keep hearing that abatement is a little more affordable because there's so many companies getting into the business, and they go a lot faster because they do schools, and they have to do it over summer. But a good policy is every time that you're doing a floor improvement of any kind, take that out too. I've seen some instances where they take out schools take out the tile and just leave the floors unfinished. So, and again, any other good questions about this level of detail? It's not a cost model, but it gives a good investigation of what the existing conditions look like. you know, everybody knows what Colonel Wright is.
Yeah, right.
The original Colonel Wright is a really cool building, but it's not a great learning environment, but by contemporary standards. Really, you can almost look at the vintage of the school and know what to expect inside. The school district's done a pretty good job, has done pretty good at that commercial, and it's done a very good job of keeping up with it with the funds that we have available. It's not anything extraordinary. They're old. The high school is the addition is newer. It's pretty nice. It's big. Anyway, no.
Nothing that we wouldn't expect or.
No. So what we do have is we have a spreadsheet that you take all of this information and put it into one big cost model. And we're going to show you that tonight. So should I plow? What I'd like to do is I do want to continue through so you can see what we're investigating.
We all know, kind of. I mean, I don't know if everybody feels.
I feel like for me, I could go over this on my own.
Yeah, for sure. I agree too. Yeah.
Get to the bottom line.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Things you have to do it. All right. I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity. If you want to look at all of it,
I
okay.
think everybody's gonna want to do that.
Yeah, that's fine.
And so what was listed on that previous slide with the A, B, C, right, missed F, those are these categories, and so like you can kind of get the idea that you're going through every part of the building, thoroughly observing the systems, and that goes all the way through mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We have great guys out here from PAE with us. They're very adept at what they do, and we're on it. Did a great evaluation. We've got structural doing the same thing. So you're gonna, as you go through, see tons of comments and things that clarify if you're confused as to what they're referring to.
So this is just a summary of your schools. This is for ODE. That's why we said there's 8 buildings, not 8 schools. There's 8 complexes, and there's 13 buildings on those complexes. It's kind of a nice chart of how many square feet, when was it built. This just summarizes it. And of course, when we create this feeds into the spreadsheet. No.
And Mosher has, Rebecca, you can help me with that, but I believe they were doing their own, right? I mean, they are having this done.
Yeah. And technically speaking, by the state doesn't recognize Mosher School as part of the Wasco School District. It's owned by
And that's
Mosher.
a different setup than Watonka.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Watonka.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I didn't realize. Thank you.
Okay. So this is kind of a good indicator.
The bottom line.
Facilities condition assessment. So it's saying, if the assessment indicates that it's 10% or 0.1, that's okay. Anything that's 0.3 or better means it's in poor condition. So where does that number come from? We're going to show you. But it's a simple formula of cost of repairs in the next year, which is what the assessment report creates, compared to the assets calculated replacement cost. Very simple. Cost of repair compared to the cost of replacing. Again, this is a snapshot of fixing the school that you're in. For instance, in the Dallas High School auditorium, we estimate about half the auditorium seating needs to be replaced. About half of it. So that means this assessment says we've got budget to replace half of it. The other half are staying. So it's a snapshot. It's like, it says we have hardware, door hardware that needs to be replaced. We're saying the hardware goes back in there. That's a replacement hardware. It is ABA. It's got a lever on it. But any of the technologies associated with safety and security, with door access controls or door indicators back to the central office, that's a whole other budget. So, very simple. And a facility condition index is the cost of repairs compared to the cost of replacing the entire asset. Now, yes, sir.
Richard, on the slide previous, the square footage, is that all of the buildings, is that the modulars and?
We did not include the modulars yet.
Modulars are not in.
Correct.
Got it.
So you've got, again, thank you. We're going to talk about, that's the capacity. We haven't even touched on capacity, which is part of the long-range facility planning process. state doesn't want to know how many square feet of modulars you have, and what condition they're in, because they're temporary, right? Oh. But thank you, Randy. We looked at physical sticks and bricks and mortar. So, cost of repair compared to replacement cost. The state tells us what the replacement cost is. They have the cost index times the cost per square foot to come up with the value of replacing the square footage like for like. So at the main building at the high school is 115,000 square feet. They base their cost to replace that on 115,000 square feet times a number that I think is around 320. I could show that to you. But so the numbers you're going to see are not our numbers. That's what the state has indicated you should use for comparison. All right, how about a few pictures? All right. So at Chenoweth, it's an amazing school in that it's had so many additions, and the original school was so very small, it was half a quarter. But anyway, so Dakota, why don't you go through these, and I had you put the labels on.
Definitely. So what we're looking at are just various examples of areas that would need repair. So things you saw in that spreadsheet, just kind of visualized for you, all those good visual learners out there. The one I really want to focus on this one is these two on the bottom right, where you have the admin exterior wall. You can see that's one of the few actual HVAC units in the entire building is literally just set into the window on a couple metal posts. That's kind of an area we'd like to, as we're looking at a long-range facility plan, be like, hey, maybe getting air conditioning and proper HVAC for Chenoweth should be more of a priority. We were talking about a built-up roof earlier. It looks exactly like that. They're renowned for leaking, especially as aged as yours are. And I guarantee you, ask anybody of the staff here, and they will tell you, thank you. Where's my laser? Which one is it? The green one?
Yes.
Ooh. So, asking the staff here, and they'll tell you it leaks often. So, that might be another thing to take into consideration as you're moving forward.
In this case, the window shaker in it, because that's the western exposure. I always get turned around. Your city turns from north to south.
The north exposure.
North exposure, thank you. So the window, that's why you cool the classroom. And in the winter, the north winds, again, you have to cover it up with plastic. That's on your front. So anyway, this is how you're managing it. The roof, you know what you got there?
Yep.
So we do have a summary of these costs.
Alright. So, Colonel Wright, like we talked about before, similar kind of things where we're looking at water pooling on roofs, and then if you go and check out that report, you're going to see areas where I talk about this foundation. This is directly under the historic building, and you see a lot of water intrusion. Alright, cool. A lot of water intrusion along this upper edge right here, and that's a big thing we look for in evaluating those basement walls. Similar kind of things you're seeing, degradation of window frames. That's a big one. You lose a lot of heat, and especially in this school, I was visiting in February, so they had space heaters just kind of hung up on the walls, and that's how the kids were keeping warm. Most of them were still in jackets and whatnot. So it definitely is another part of looking at the long-range facility plan. Can I? Oh, I don't. You're not. Troy Hollow, in my opinion, is one of the better upkept schools, but there's still tons of areas for improvement. You're seeing here, this is the library where they put out little buckets to catch leakage from the ceiling.
And it was interesting as we looked in one classroom, then looked into another classroom, we became tuned to, or inclined to look for the same leak in the same spot in every classroom. And I'd say 90% of the classrooms had the same leak in the same spot.
I went to Dry Hollow, and I remember member, I just had a flashback of the buckets.
Yeah.
The cupboards look the same.
You're like, oh my god, that's the same place.
This is another good example of, by today's standards, a flat roof. And flat roofs do leak, even the best flat roof. So even getting a little bit of slope on it helps get that water off the roof. So when we talk about replacing the roof, we're talking about like for like. I'm not talking about putting tapered insulation to get some pitch to it. And again, this is just, it's a snapshot of what you have. It's not really addressing the whole issue. But it's a great start. That's really what I'm hoping to indicate.
So, we're talking about capacity. I probably should have made this the biggest picture on the whole slide. This cafeteria serves about 400 students daily. This is also your storage for the space and the stage. The gym's just to the left of it, right over here. It's impressive that they are able to even schedule the lunches and make it all happen as it is. It blew my mind. I was like, that's more coordination I could ever possibly put together. So we're talking about capacity moving forward with the long-range plan. This is another one that you can definitely kind of chime back to. That's right, that's right. Dry Hollow needed that.
And of course, everybody knows at Dry Hollow, the enrollment is increased because you have the modules out there, the relocatables.
All right, we went into this pretty in-depth. Again, built-up roof over here.
Carpet in the auditorium, even though it's just in the aisles, nice red tape, it's color coordinated.
So the library has the same.
I know.
It's not red, but.
It's in there, it's in there. So this right here is probably my favorite picture. This is you guys' main gym, and this is one of the big HVAC units you have hung from the ceiling, suspended from the ceiling. Right now, I don't know if it's still there, but at the time, there was a large plastic bag with a hose that was catching all the excess water and draining it away. This is a beautiful gym. It's absolutely gorgeous. We both fell in love when we got to explore it. But I just would hate to see it start to erode and fade away, and this is kind of what that's going to start leading to. So similar kind of things looking at maybe athletics and those sort of things. I know it's a big deal out here, so keep those in mind as you're kind of moving forward.
There's some amazing elements to this school. You mentioned the library. Those murals in the library are amazing. So there's a lot of really nice elements to them.
I was being nitpicky. This is a great brand new facility that honestly comes out, that FCI, that cost index you saw, comes out to only 1.6%. It doesn't really need too many renovations. It wouldn't be that expensive to update, it's so new. These are just a few examples of just areas of general maintenance that would need to happen, but for the most part, it's already almost been addressed. I know this one in particular has.
So the digital arts, I mean, again, this is, even though this was built in 2008, but this is one. Teaching and learning has really evolved, even from 2001. You've got conduit on the floor. It needs some work too.
This is probably my favorite school because it reminds me of the elementary school I went to. As far as water intrusion into fluorescent lights, that was a common occurrence. So things like this we really hate to see just because it can be so dangerous. That's such a fire hazard. It can go so wrong so quickly. But you can start to see some of these other areas that will need improvement kind of moving forward in the future. Especially, Petanque is a hard one because it has so many varied uses right now. Areas of it are part of outdoor programs and various other needs that the community has. So you start to see a lot of interesting areas. So moving forward, how you approach Petanque could be a very unique kind of outlook. We've people who did the high school planning meetings kind of saw that this is an area where there's a lot of potential for shift and creating new environments, learning environments especially. And then,
so before you go, we did review the district office transportation building as well. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. So looking at the district office, honestly, the building's in pretty good shape. The biggest thing that I would kind of even touch on is just kind of this whole basement area would need bring, I'm gonna like back up to code. There's some areas down there that aren't necessarily perfect, but for the most part, it's these little fixes. So again, if you look at those spreadsheets, you're gonna see that the district office isn't the biggest cost at all. But just little renovations like these guys here, the carpet and things that I know Cindy absolutely loves. So, moving forward again, as you kind of are budgeting things up, maybe a little bit goes, excuse me, toward your district office. So, I'll let Richard take it back over, but.
Wait, didn't you do Chenoweth Middle School?
We did not do Chenoweth Middle School because it is closed. And you went in.
Yep, so I went in with, his name's escaping me, but he's one of the janitors at Watonka, and we kind of just looked around and kind of evaluated everything. It wasn't necessarily part of this entire study, since it's technically outside of your urban growth boundary at this point, and it's kind of, as far as I'm aware, a condemned building.
So, let me correct. It's not on the state rules of buildings of schools in use.
Okay, so that was my question is, if they're wanting to know every building in the state, why wouldn't you look at that?
Yeah, yeah. So it's not in use school. He's got it.
Which was part of the conversation. We talked to the state, said, okay, what about Mosier? What about Chenoweth Middle School? So we verified that with them, and they said, well, that's not on our list. We didn't have a building ID number. It's not in use, so.
So as a district though, would it behoove us to do this study on that building?
So fair enough. It would be very difficult because it's really been vacant for so long. You've got vagrants living in it. We could do it, but I know we don't know the answer. But we would have to pull, a lot of the barriers off. We'd have to take a concerted effort, but we could do it. It's just.
It would be a lot of replace, and so you'd end up kind of with just, well, let's just tear it down. Yeah. And just to touch on the vagrants thing, I saw some faces. There was at one point, I just told Richard a story, they've been removed since, don't worry, it was only a overnight thing.
Was the opposite.
Yes.
And so that would come into play with the Scenic Act and all that stuff as well, it would just be a big thing, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So really the question is not what is the condition of it, what would it take to revitalize it and start reusing it again?
Exactly. And we know the answer.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Fire.
Well, we're presuming that it would exceed even the FCIs that we've got. We will do it, but we're gonna have to have a concerted effort to pull everything, pull the boards off, really get in there. We'll do it.
No, I'm not saying you need to. I'm just saying, why, I was just curious why.
The state doesn't want to know what it is. The state doesn't.
We don't want to know either.
We knew this was a tough one. We did. That's why we went and looked at it and go, okay, I'm not sure how we do this.
Okay.
But,
I just think the community's going to have the same question. If we're looking at every building, why did we ignore that one? But if it's not on their list, then
I think it's going to be our job to communicate that to the community.
I agree.
So here's the way you can do it. Again, that's what the long-range facilities planning gives you the authority to do. Is say, wait a minute, we've got this school, we want to use it, let's put that in the plan. Then we can do that. We'll do the evaluation as necessary, but that empowers you. But so it's kind of a catch-22.
Sure.
You aren't using it. The state doesn't give it a building ID. But if you were to revitalize it and open it up again and use it, then the state would have to give you a building ID. So we'll be happy to work through that. We knew that question was out there. So, all right. So, Chenoweth is a combined roughly $21 million to replace. I jumped to the replacement cost. That's based on square footage. That's 8, 8, and 13. The repair costs are the 5.5 million, and that's just to fix what you got. So, the FCI that we referred to before is 24 0.87%. So that's in the middle. It's not poor and good. So this is a good illustration of, this doesn't really tell you what the whole story. What you know is that it doesn't have the capacity, but that's what the long range facility plan. So by this standard, it's close. Anything over 3 really is in poor condition. So if you put those two together, you're going to get, that's 2 buildings. One of them is the addition that was the newer addition.
Yep.
So that's why that one's a little bit better. So the state wants us to look at these individually, but you can see if we put them together, then you might have a good indication of what that site looks like as far as the FCI, the Facility Condition Index. Colonel Wright. Building 1 is the original building.
Yep.
33.42. It's over that 3 threshold. Building 2 is the admin building.
Correct.
At 22, that's the one that's the best, if you would. 29, then the 1962. What year was that addition? Do you remember?
The late 50s.
Late 50s, yeah. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good building. I mean, it's actually one of the nicer schools. But you can see it's got a rating of 29, which is close to that 3.
Well, it's called the new building. You know,
Yes.
Actually call it the new building.
I mean, it makes sense. You've seen the other ones.
I've got DPI. So, Dry Hollow is 1 building, 28.49, close. The middle school is a 1. The Dalles High School, the main building is a 34. That's the last one. The kitchen, the chat and chew is at 31. And then the auxiliary, the gym and the auxiliary gym are at the 26. So you can see all of these are hovering, except for the middle school, are hovering around that poor condition.
I'm sorry, maybe you mentioned this, but the replacement cost you have there, that's to replace it with exactly what is there now?
Exactly. So you need more than that. It's like the chat and chew is a good example. It's not a big enough for everybody. That's all you can fit it in.
I know the gym was getting a seismic assessment. Are those going to be combined with these in terms of repairs? Because seismic repair obviously would make it go way up, right?
So great, thank you. Great question. Same structural engineer did the assessment, and all they were doing with their assessment is the existing condition of the building, no upgrades.
Okay,
So
so
the
seismic is considered an upgrade.
Yeah, above and beyond. Yeah, yeah. Really good question.
I think that's the thing we have to just zone in on is we're talking apples to apples.
Yep.
To replace
Exactly.
what
Is there right
is there, not, yeah.
A seismically unsafe building with another seismically unsafe.
Right.
Exactly. So, and again, I keep trying to preach this. This is like for like. This is not the plan.
Yeah,
This is a good indicator of just if
of
you,
where we are.
where we are.
These are just for the next year repairs, right? So
Right.
inevitably next year there would be more repairs that were needed and the cost would go up a little bit, so.
Right. Yeah. So this is a great baseline. That's really what I want to tell you. You've got a baseline of you fixed everything up. This is what it looks like.
Well, in a way, that's true, but it's this year we're saying we're gonna replace, under your repair costs, you're saying you're gonna replace the windows. You aren't gonna need to replace them next year. So
Correct.
your total cost isn't 53 million every year.
No.
It'll drop significantly.
But
No.
assuming you replace it all in the next year, because these
Right.
things obviously could have a longer time.
Yeah, and things deteriorate, so the things that were no repair needed this year might be repair needed next year, so then when you factor the cost of those two together, you're obviously over the 30%, so.
Again, it's a really good baseline of information. 37. The little annex building, which is, isn't that the shop? That's a community wood shop?
That's still part of the building, that's just the IT.
Oh,
yeah.
IT, oh, the IT building.
Yeah.
Thank you. District office at a 25.
I wanna talk about that out
I
loud
was
real
gonna,
quick.
I was gonna say,
So,
Don?
because the way this works, it's with this number over this number, it came out to, such a small space in comparison. So when we actually put in the square footage, this is the one downside. It pumped out a number that's not necessarily correct as far as its need for improvement, but I'm not gonna deny the fact that that area does need major improvement. There's some definite issues with the roof on the district facility building, but this is an outlier, and so don't let that skew the rest of this very important data. I wanted to include it just so we had everything in front of you guys. You could see that we actually were there and did it, but kind of a sad result because of the general square footage of this office space is so small.
So it's a good base on which it's a foundation on which you build, because everybody wants to know what's the condition of our schools. So right now, just to fix what you have is $54 million, according to the state spreadsheet. Which is, so what I do want to segue into is, what do we do now? This is good information. Please scrutinize it. Review it. That's why you're going to get a copy. All right. What we're providing you is the state's presentation. So we have about 30 minutes, is that right? Yes. So this is what the state says is a long-range facility plan. Population projections, collaboration with local government, you can read these, community involvement, historical building information, we got some zingers in there, educational adequacy standards. This one is going to be interesting in that essentially it's evaluating kind of the quality of spaces, so it goes beyond the bricks and mortar of warm, safe, and dry. We're going to ask, we're going to create a committee, or not committees, we're going to use this group to answer all these questions. And then a 10-year proposed plan. That's what the state wants you to create, is the 10-year plan based on all those items above. So let's talk about those for just a minute. Okay. So, population projections. The study that was done previously used a study that was done by Portland State for another agency in the Dalles. The data says that it's pretty flat, population growth. We can use that again, or the school district can commission a study with Portland State. They do it all across the state. You'll have to get in the queue. Every state is now, every school district in the state is wanting an assessment. They have recently created a small to medium school district protocol. The data is the same. They used to shy away from it because there just really wasn't enough data. This is to be determined. The information, in our experience, we've used this kind of data. We used it for Redmond, but it's just interpolating the data that was provided on population trends in the Dalles. We also can do a recognized process of cohort survival, which is math, essentially giving the 10 years of enrollment trends at the school district. We plug that into a formula, and it interpolates for the next 10 years. I think if your enrollment was flat over the last 10 years, it's going to continue to show that it's relatively flat. we will do both of those. I think this one remains an item that needs to be addressed on what this committee and the community thinks is really important. So this is important because you got to know if there's growth, you need more schools. You've had growth in the community because you have all the portables. So is it going to continue? You've also closed schools, consolidated. All right, this is to be determined. The next one, all right, collaboration with local government. This is really can be a fun exercise because the intent is to, this is primarily for school districts that are in heavy growth areas, because if you're in a heavy growth area like Hillsborough or Forest Grove, the school district wants, or excuse me, the state wants the school district to collaborate with local government to plan where schools are going to go. Where's the population, where is the housing going to go, and please leave sites so that you can build schools to support those kids. At your level, that's good information, but there's another opportunity. You want to work with every agency in the city that actually has funding capabilities, also known as Parks and Rec, library. They want a collaboration between the school district, the college. They want a collaborative approach on how to provide the best facilities to the students in the community. The school district and the college have collaborated many times on the programs, even the Workforce Training Center. So that dialogue is already open. So this is, we're going to touch all the bases and reaching out to the city government, Parks and Rec, and the library and the college. There probably are others. So it's just a collaborative approach to capital improvements. Another example is that Parks and Rec is going to plan a bond in 3 or 4 years. Then the two entities ought to talk about how that can be mutually beneficial. And maybe they stagger it, and maybe you got to work together. That's what they want. They don't want everybody just having their own plan and not considering what the left hand is doing in a community. So this is an important note. We're going to reach out through the school district to the city and set up those opportunities for collaboration.
Do you know if the Gorge Scenic Commission or the Scenic Act, do they have any sort of a branch that works with districts that are inhibited or areas that are inhibited by those growth boundaries?
So the only most recent experience I have is working with the Gorge Commission is very problematic. Because those are the lines, you know the rules, those are the rules.
So, literally an act of Congress.
Yeah, so I mean, yes.
Okay.
So please, if there's an entity that you think the school district should reach out to for input, please let the school district know. Community involvement. More challenging and often lacking piece of the long-range facility plan. Ha! Why would you do that? It's not a long-range plan if you don't connect with your community. I think this is why you've been invited here. We think it's the basis of all good planning processes. You have to connect with the community and the teachers and the staff and the administration and really figure out what's best for the school district, because everybody uses schools. Everybody pays for schools. So, determining an educational vision and a 10-year proposal. I know the school district has that in place. They update it periodically. So this is a shared vision as to why you're here. And we're going to show you a little illustration of what that looks like. This is how they want us to document it. List of members, that's why we had the sign-in list as a start of community task force to review the facility information. Okay, you did that, you're going to do more. Thank you. Meeting in the minutes, between Cindy and our office, we're gonna provide you the documentation of the process, both the notes and the materials that you're seeing. And we're soliciting feedback. That's why even those people that are streaming the meeting have the opportunity to submit those those questions. And any results of community surveys. The school district hasn't defined really what that looks like just yet, but they probably will be running some surveys that are follow-up to these meetings. So it's engaging the community in the decision-making process. All right, the recommendation. All right, this is more, I love this. This is a great illustration of who you want to include in the process, because everybody has a stake one way or another. Those that are affected have a high level of importance, because they're the ones that are going to have to use it, meet their needs. They have low influence, but they've got leverage, and they have to use it. This really impacts them. Key players. Let's go right. Heavily invested in the school district. Who really believes the school district is important to their long-term growth? Real estate brokers are very invested in it. Real estate banks, really important that the schools and the community have a reputation that can support their business. Really, there's some really community members who are just vested in the school, period. They're really influenced by that. We want to mobilize them. They can make a difference. They are the movers and shakers. This is really important. We want those people on this committee so that they can get the information, so they can communicate that in the community. Influencers. Some people, they want to be informed and consulted on some of the decision process. We need to make sure that the influencers are really communicating, or connected to what's going on, that they know what's going on, because they do influence the overall community. And then bystanders, they're least affected. We just want to persuade them to be connected and to want to persuade them to support what's the best for the community as a whole. So I love it. If we touch all these bases, yes?
Actually, take exception to that least affected. If we're talking about a bond, the bystanders are the taxpayers and they're not the least affected.
Fair enough. This is ODE, not me.
Okay.
So,
call them and chew them out.
That's right.
That's not
So,
community talk.
Great.
That's not
Yeah.
how
Then let's not
we
do
want to
that.
make a foundation.
Then let's not do that. So, but the bystanders, so let's determine those bystanders that are affected through the tax base. Fair enough, yeah. So, great. There may, I love the analogy, I love the question. It's a spot on.
I'll touch on that real quick also. I was about to say, I really don't like this chart in general, because when you're doing community outreach, you actually want these arrows to be crossing this, and having those key players come together with the bystanders and have that interaction and that dialogue so you can actually move forward. What this is kind of more getting at is people with major influence who could try to drive a project more than trying to degrade people who wouldn't be there for it. Again, like I said, don't really like the graphic for that sense, but it does communicate that there are people who are more heavily invested, that's all. Yeah.
Historical buildings. As we understand, the high school, is the high school and Colonel Wright both registered historic places?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I, all right. By ORS, and I forgot the number, any public building over 50 years old has to be filed with SHPO, State Historic Preservation. Okay, it's not an onerous process. We are the architects for Gresham High School replacement, and Gresham High School, kind of like your gymnasium and your high school are significant buildings. And at Gresham High School, they're replacing virtually everything. The important elements, the bas-relief on the bookends have been salvaged. All of the ironwork that was created at the same vintage as your high school have been salvaged. On the facade, there are replicas that have been crafted of the bas-relief that are going back into place. The bas-relief themselves are about 18 inches thick, and they're being displayed inside of a courtyard on the inside. So SHPO liked what we did. You need to record what's important, create a plan for salvaging as much as possible, and recording as much as possible. So it's not an onerous process, it's just a process. And it applies to any building, any school building over 50 years old, which means, gentlemen, and what am I forgetting? Do you identify what?
Basically
All of them except
All
the
except
middle
the middle
school. All except the middle school. So this does come into play. Like I said, it's not onerous, it's just another level of the process.
It adds cost, I'm assuming.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Is there a percentage of it, or just any, it could be anything?
it could be
10%?
anything.
Oh.
It doesn't have to be, the cost could be as simple as the process to identify what's there. It doesn't have to be salvaged. It's not like the high school that is on the register of historic places. That does affect the cost there, because you, like the window replacement that I referred to an hour and a half ago, that has to maintain the integrity of the school. You can tear those down, and that's an extreme case. And I'm not talking about the high school. I'm talking about Genowith and the other school. You can tear them down, just salvage what is significant and important. So that's where this one comes into play. That's a relatively new legislation. I mean, I think has it always been on the books and just never enforced?
I don't know.
Yeah. We just recently became aware of it, so. And the kicker is any school building over 50 years old. There we go. Okay. All right. Educational adequacy. This is, we hope to form a group with the school district that is teachers, administrators, anybody involved in the process of teaching and learning. Because this really gets to the core of what schools are about. What does the educational environment look like, and what is adequate to provide that teaching and learning to your kids? So they don't have a defined form, it's not like the assessment, but they want a plan to determine what's the educational adequacy of each one of these schools, which then really plays heavily into your long-range facility plan. For instance, the high school, okay, you have how many seats in the auditorium? 1,000? 900. Yeah, 900. That's great. It's a lot of square footage. It's really too big for anything except an all-school assembly. Does the school want an all-school assembly in there, or can you do it better in the gymnasium? So those are the questions that we can ask. We see more school districts saying, you know what, we need a 550. Our enrollment is so big, not everybody can fit. So those are the kind of questions that we're going to ask. They have some outlines. Ooh. Here we go. That was it. Here's what they want you to ask. Capacity, number one. You have to determine an enrollment capacity that your school can handle. And there's a number of ways to do it. You can do it based on what's your average class size, that's your target enrollment, and how many square feet are required to do that. There's some pretty good standards. They say use other state standards. There's some pretty good standards. If you say you want your class sizes at 25 or 28, create a model that says If it's 28, this is how big a space we need. And you compare that to what you have. I think you're going to find out very quickly that the only way you're accomplishing it is through the relocatables. I love that. Obviously. You can do it, remember on high school and middle school, if you have a block schedule, then that means a block schedule, only 75% of the classes will use it one time. Or kids, there's only 75% of the kids in class at one time. So you kind of move around, it takes a little bit bigger. If you're a 7-class period, then that's 83%, because you always have a planning period for your teachers. So you have to factor those in, and then you just calculate how many square feet of instructional space you need for each student, and how many square feet do you have in the entire building that's allocated to traditional teaching. And then how do you count the how do you count the gym? Is it gym 2 workstation or teacher stations, or 1? So you can see that's a process to determine how you want to calculate the capacity for your school district, how it works for your school district. And we're going to help show you how other school districts don't get to pick which one works best. Support for programs. Title I, special ed, breakout spaces, all of those spaces that are outside the traditional instructional space, they don't exist in most schools. Where do you have a breakout for kids who need one-on-one instruction? So we essentially are going to write a program for what is the ideal school, and then compare it to what you have. What are you missing? All those special programs. What are your after-school programs? Can they double up in some spaces? Technology. Remember I told you that we would get back to this one? We take the assessment and use that as a starting point. Well, where do we need to be? Where schools need to be? What do we want to have? Are you one-on-one? Are you going to go to? There's a new gee whiz technology where you can provide, you can remove IDF. You start from MDF. I'm getting way over my skis now. It's latest and greatest. I get to get up. But anyway, what's the level of infrastructure that you really need in your school? Supervision and security. Remember that survey we were talking about? Physical configuration. Does it help or does it hinder? What is the ideal configuration? Then you overlay that assessment, that evaluation on the spaces you have. And it begins to kind of crystallize all these things that brought forward in the assessment as to how adequate are your schools. Equipment. Anybody been to your science classrooms lately? Yikes.
Thank you.
On the assessment, that was replace all that.
Yeah.
Yikes. So you look at your career tech ed programs, just all of the tools that teachers need, and we create essentially what is the program requirement for like special needs. What do those programs look like? What kind of program can you deliver? Or do you need to deliver based on your student enrollment? Physical characteristics. Size and space of the instructional classroom. There's some research that shows that a classroom, a fat L is what it's called. This is just one example. It's called a fat L because that's what it looks like. It's not a square or rectangular classroom. It kind of bulges out here. And what it does is it creates multiple learning spaces inside of a classroom. So your teacher might do a plenary instruction on a new application, a new learning, and everybody's sitting there listening to it. Okay, great. So 20% of the kids kind of get it, and they all go back to their desks and working on it. You got some kids that need a little bit more to repeat that again. They can be over here in this area. And then the kids over here are not disrupting them because they're in these kind of fat L's. Then you got some kids that need one-on-one. So by having these different shape, it gives you a little bit better configuration that you can break it into groups. That's just a one example. Relationships of spaces. Proximity, I'm gonna go restrooms. Elementary schools. Kids like to go to the restroom. So instead of having one down the hall, if they have groups where they don't have to go very far. Even the kinders, the kinders really need a restroom in their classroom, not down the hall. And they need to be appropriately sized. What is the right program for, what are the relationships of spaces for your kids? Cafeteria, let's go to the high school. Where do kids eat lunch? Chat and chew. Most schools, most contemporary high schools have a central space. And it's not just because they want a grand space, but they want a central space so they can know their kids. They want all their kids, they may have an open campus, but the freshmen usually a closed campus. They want all their kids kind of in one spot so they can create community. And if they don't have a place that they can sit on the floor or hang out with their friends, they're going to find it in the hallways. So at every level, there's some discussion that we can have about the relationship of spaces and where they might be located. So you can see this is really a fun one. But we really want to get our teachers and administrators who deal with this on the day-to-day special to really give you a recommendations on what that looks like. They may not like the fat animal law. Forget it. We're done. No, let's go back to the conventional classroom. That's okay. I would ask, maybe you should consider empowering them to tell us what contemporary teaching and learning looks like to them. So, the approach, they don't define exactly how you do it. This is what I was saying, you can get input from the community, have the district and assessors do a collaboration with your teachers, and actually create a list of standards. And those standards might be all K2 classrooms need to be this size, and they need to have this equipment, and they need to have this relationship. Take that to the community. We'll share with you some of the other state standards. Washington has some good state standards. There's actually a list of all the states and what they have for their educational advocacy. We'll give you those as samples. And then create those standards so that you can do this analysis. We really prefer to, or we have seen it work best when we work with the teachers to really start to define it, giving them some samples, and bring us back to the community and say, hey, this is what your teacher's saying. Can you endorse this, or do you have some other questions that we need to address? All right. 7:52. It's been a lot, but it was just information. There's no assignments, fortunately. So we do have some time for some questions, and we would love to answer.
Of course I have a question. 2, number 1, when is the next meeting? And number 2, where does the facilities development that happened last year fit into this 10-year plan?
Thank you. Great question. First, the next meeting has to be determined. We want to find out what the reaction was to the response to this meeting and providing the information. I think, can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, so in terms of, that's a good, we can get 2 things done at once. So we're talking about basically next steps.
Right.
And so what we need to know from this, I'm hoping we'll have some questions from online. Hopefully we'll have questions from you folks. What we need to answer will determine how quickly or how slowly we need to move forward. In other words, if we get questions that say, or recommendations that say we need to move out and take this information to some other groups first, Richard doesn't need to be at every one of those. Some of us that are in the room and some of us that are staff can go out and reach out to other groups, and then we can convene another meeting. Okay, so I didn't put it on the calendar. I think we really need to determine within this community who is reached tonight, who hasn't been reached, who needs to be reached. We've got a lot of information here, but we need some input from people first before we make the next step. Yeah.
The effort that was done is nice information for future look, reference. There's several studies, and maybe there's something in that would foster another discussion. It's all good information. It's kind of like, yeah, I think more information is okay, but that would only be a reference. We're going to follow the ODE process, and there may come up with some of the conclusions, but it may not. Wouldn't say we're starting over. I think we have a good start of understanding of some of the things. I think everybody knows that there's a desire to have a high school. Okay, let's put that over here. Now let's get back to what this is. Yes.
So this is tied into work the state's doing to first establish what the need is in schools across the state, correct? And then, once they know how much, try to find out how to fund that, I would assume.
Right.
Is there a time frame attached to that? Because it would seem like that might drive some timelines that we would want to possibly be ahead of the curve, so we don't hit everything the same time every other school district in the state of Oregon does.
So it's a community process, and they recommend, ODE recommends 18 to 24 months. And so it's up to the community to determine, how fast or how slow. And as Richard said, the information that we have from before is here to inform. It's going to be up to this community as to how they want to move along with that.
Right, but they're looking at possibly finding some way to fund things, right?
So
that's the hope,
right? That's the hope.
Okay.
So right now, the funding grants are $2 to $8 million, and they do the funding based on some criteria, and not everybody gets funded.
Mm-hmm.
And so the process is still moving. There's no timeline on when they're going to get all the schools assessed, or if, right?
Yeah.
They do fund the 2 grants, reimbursements, on an annual basis, and not everybody gets funding, so not everybody's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So the short answer is, I don't know. I don't think they know. They just know that they need to start collecting this data as soon as possible.
And looking at what's going on at the legislative level right now, they're moving forward. They're not looking to put huge amounts into the facilities piece, so we're still moving along at the same pace that we are. We're in a regular session. It'll be a short session next year, so you're really looking out a ways. Right now, the state is focusing very much on trying to increase the amount of funding that goes into the teaching and learning aspect as opposed to the facilities aspect right now. That's where all the focus is right now. But that can help us inform us in terms of the educational piece, because I think most of you are aware there's a tremendous push around social emotional learning and the kinds of supports that need to be in schools. This is a good opportunity for us to include that as as we're looking at educational standards. What does a school look like that would be inclusive of the kind of setting that we're talking about now needing moving into the future?
If this is any indication, the Governor's Commission on School Facilities was created about 12 years ago.
All right.
And it took about 9 years to get to where we are.
Okay.
And
It's a great timeline.
Is this ODE process just like a state requirement?
It's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
No, from the states, their assessment, Randy could probably answer this better, it's one of the criteria that would better your position for funding.
Yes, but I mean, the state wants this information whether we do anything with it or not, correct?
Correct.
And I'm just curious how long they wanted the information, I guess.
Oh, well, when was the grant approved?
Pardon me?
The grant was approved about a month ago, the TAP grant?
Yeah, March.
I
But,
mean,
no, I think your point is,
Thank you.
this data is gonna go in there, and it's gonna be there. But they're not gonna, the state per se is not gonna do anything with it. It's for us.
Well, if we didn't have the grant, if we weren't looking to upgrade anything, we were just ignoring the huge elephant in the room, would the state still want to know about our buildings? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yes.
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 Okay, and do we know when did they get so nosy?
Well, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's to the school district's benefit to give them the data.
Yes, I'm saying, I agree with you, I want to know.
They would
when.
never.
So going, if I can step
Yeah,
in on
please
that. Going back to, it is a mandate, it's an unfunded mandate.
Yes.
And so there are a number of districts throughout the school that have, throughout the state that have not been able to afford to follow through with this process.
Which we were one of, because we got the grant.
Correct, now we've got the grant, we can't.
Okay.
So,
Great, thank you, Gary.
I think also what her question is, when did the mandate come into existence?
Thank you. Yes.
It's 8 o'clock, so we should
Well-
probably
Yeah,
figure out next steps.
Yeah, I will give you that ORS has been on the books for a long time, I'll get that down for you. Yeah. So,
okay, so next steps, what I'm hearing from you folks, I need to have some input in terms of, you've got Cindy's email address, as you're thinking about it now, if you can get questions, comments, because like I said, we'll move as slowly or as quickly as the community is ready to go. But just know that right now, Cindy's launching actually a communications survey. We're going to start with trying to figure out how are we doing as a district in terms of communication and get a better way, a better read on how to communicate with more people in our community so that we make sure that we can be as inclusive as possible moving forward. So that's being launched tomorrow. But for now, going away from this, what I need from you is feedback on the process. How did we do tonight? You know, send the emails, please send them to Cindy. And then who do we need to take this to? Do we need to go to the city council? Do we need to, is there someplace else that we need to go with this before we establish another meeting? Who else needs to be involved and invited? Okay? Does that make sense? Any real quick comment before we close up, because I really want to respect people's time tonight. All right, well, thank you. I really appreciate all of you taking the time.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I have to too. No, I think it's great.